Hey everyone, Arthur here. Welcome to episode 2 of the most expensive games of every single console. We're now moving to the 7th generation. Do check out the video for the 8th generation that's already up, as we are going back in time, and you will notice that the more we go back, the more there will be interesting games and stories around them to explain why they're so expensive. And beginning with this generation, you will notice that I'm also including the oddball game systems, because we're really gonna go through every single game system. So there's gonna be a lot of interesting lesser known stuff here. Quick rules for the top most expensive games: I'm not considering graded copies, variants with different covers and such, not for resale games or special editions, unless the game inside is meaningfully different, because I want to rank the games and not the special stuff found in collector's editions. I'm also focusing more on NTSC US copies, but different regions will also be considered, especially if they are the only version of the game. I'm purposefully skipping the current 9th generation to give it more time to develop itself, but I'll go back to it in the end. And if you're interested, I'm giving away a copy of After Image, a cool new Metroidvania. To participate and also to join our group of gaming enthusiasts sharing all kinds of information, I invite you to join the channel's Discord server. Come hang out, talk about games, and risk winning a free game every once in a while, as I'll be giving another game also this month. And with all that said, let's get into the list. Welcome to the channel, this is From the Void. Up first, we have one of my favorite systems ever, especially when it comes to the games it has to offer, the Nintendo DS. Such a magnificent little console, drawing inspirations from the multi-screen Game & Watch systems from back in the 80s, showing how Nintendo is capable of recycling, modernizing, and enhancing good ideas from the past, in this case, from decades prior. This thing is a fantastic system. Graphically, it was inferior to the PSP, for instance, but it opens so many possibilities to developers that embraced it that it completely compensates for it and then some. The library of games on the DS is nothing short of staggering, and though not one of the most expensive games to be found, there are some real bangers here. Beginning with Shepherd's Crossing 2. Is that a duck carrying a bottle on his back? What's going on here? So yeah, this is a very obscure game. It is a farming simulator with many similarities to Harvest Moon. You will also pick between a boy and a girl, earn a piece of land, chop trees and plant crops, raise livestock, earn money, interact with the townspeople, romance some of them, marry one of them, and all that jazz. It does have some impressive amount of freedom, more so than Harvest Moon titles, but it also comes with a caveat. The controls and systems put in place to manage so many activities and items is somewhat obtuse and will take a while to learn. So the beginning may be frustrating, but the game develops itself a lot. It is less polished in many ways compared to Harvest Moon, but the mechanisms it provides are realistic and pretty cool. This is a solid farming sim for sure. However, it didn't sell. People tend to blame the marketing or lack thereof for the poor sales. Even Nintendo-focused publications didn't review this game, so no one bought it back in the day, and this is now one of the rarest games on the system. I can attest, I have been looking for it for years and have never seen it. It will cost you a pretty penny. Complete copies go for $350, while eBay's prices are currently surpassing that. Recent sold copies went for $374, and current offerings sit on almost $500. Next is the precious Solitaire Robo Red the Hunter. This is a treasure, okay? I wish more games like this existed. Full of heart, well crafted, cool gameplay ideas, beautiful on the DS, one of the best looking games on the system, awesome world and cast of characters, amazing game all around. Its only fault is that it never pushes you too hard. It's a mildly easy game, but very enjoyable nonetheless. This is the second entry on the Little Tail Bronx series, which is still going on, by the way, to this day. They recently released Fuga Melodies of Steel, and its sequel has just just come out, and all these games are great. In Solitaire Robo, you control a dog called Red who uses a mech, and the way you battle here is by grabbing enemies when they are vulnerable and throw them against other enemies to cause damage. There's a whole thing around the act of grabbing and throwing that makes the gameplay involving and a lot of fun. This is a great game here, highly recommended. The only problem is the price. It is expensive for many reasons. The game was released close to the end of the DS lifecycle in the end of 2011. They only made limited quantities. In the US, it only came in a special edition of sorts with a soundtrack CD. Here it is. This is one of my favorite games I own, hands down. I only don't have the cover box, but I'm okay with that. And the final reason is that people really want the US version, not the European one, because that's the one that has the DLC already inside the cartridge. And of course, we don't have access to download those anymore. So all that is why Solitaire Robo now commands no less than $370 as per price charting for a US complete in box copy, while on eBay I couldn't find sold or current offerings for less than $400. Before we get to the number 1, I have one honorable mention, as this is the actual most expensive cartridge made for the DS, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess preview trailer. Yeah. They made a preview trailer for Twilight Princess and stuck it in a DS cartridge to promote the game, and this is insanely expensive nowadays. It was made in incredibly low numbers and handed out as a press kit to promote the game during E3 2004. Remember E3? Yeah, that's history now. So if you want to see this trailer of Twilight Princess in very low quality, not doing the game's beautiful graphics any justice whatsoever, and do it on your Nintendo DS or 3DS, you'll have to spend very close to $3,000 for a complete copy as per price charting. Sold copies on eBay went for closer to $4,000, and the cheapest offering as of the making of this video asks for $10,000. Holy crap. This is just an honorable mention because it's not a game, just a video in a DS cartridge. But a very curious one I wanted to add. But the most expensive game on the DS is a famous one. It's the McDonald's E-Crew development program. This was found and dumped recently by a YouTuber after being lost for a long while, because this was a training program developed by McDonald's to train their hired employees in the tasks they would perform. It was never meant to be released to the public. There are actually two versions in two different carts. ECDP is the more famous and more complete one, as it is aimed at recent hires, while eSmart 2.0 has less features and was aimed at more veteran employees. I'm considering them both as one entry because they're very similar, and the tasks that the game provides are actually surprisingly in-depth and well made. This probably did achieve its goal of training the employees back then, but since the YouTube video achieved incredible reach, word got out and more copies of these games started circulating, so the prices reduced a bit. Price charting doesn't track this game, but on eBay, the last complete version, eSmart 2.0, is going for close to $1,000, while eCDP is more expensive at $1,500. There is a huge caveat with these games though. From what I gather, they all require a specific password to open, so if the seller doesn't know the password, you'll have to find a way to crack the code. Next, we move on to the Revolution, the Nintendo Wii. Divisive game system in many ways. It really did revolutionize gaming, at least for a while, popularizing it to the more skeptical members of our families by introducing many different ways to play games with the use of motion controls, which also generated a lot of backlash from gamers that wanted Nintendo to pursue the graphical and specs race. But nowadays it's seen as a major success, not only financially but also looking back at its impressive library of games. Sure, it had a lot of shovelware, but also some real great ones, including from Nintendo themselves, who did not forget about their core franchises with traditional gameplay like many feared would happen. That was definitely the case with the third most expensive game on the Wii right now, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Fire Emblem games don't require an introduction in a general sense. They are all exceptional tactical RPGs, but it's worth mentioning that this is a direct sequel to the GameCube entry Path of Radiance, with many of the same characters from my favorite cast of any Fire Emblem game, while also introducing pretty cool new ones like Micaiah, who is a total boss. The game is very similar to its GameCube predecessor in gameplay, but that's a good thing in my view, keeping the classic Fire Emblem feel and wonderful strategy challenge. It makes for a fantastic game for sure, among the best on the Wii. Back then though, the franchise was not as popular as it is now, so US copies were produced in lower quantities compared to most other Nintendo games. Later on, when people started discovering the series more and more, demand for it surged while supplies were stuck in lower quantities. And there you have it, it's now surpassing $150 complete in box, while eBay's prices were a bit less expensive. Next up, and contrasting drastically with the quality of Fire Emblem, is Veggie World. Oh lord, what to say about this one? It's a really mediocre shoot 'em up. It's not quite a cute 'em up, cause things are not cute at all. They're all just bland and uninteresting and lacking in any kind of art direction. The veggie theme too, I mean, what's the idea, right? Why vegetables? I don't get it. Most people probably also didn't back in the day, because it sold terribly and is now one of the rarest games on the system. It goes for over $200 according to both eBay and price charting, while loose copies can go for way cheaper. Before going to the number 1, I have an honorable mention, Atrevete a Soñar. Yeah, what the hell is this, right? I'll tell you, it's another crappy game. This is based on a teenager Mexican soap opera about teenager wannabe pop stars or whatever. The production quality in this game is atrocious, cutscenes are actually slideshows, characters look horrendous, and the gameplay seems trashy as well. This is a rhythm game, and there are dancing stages that use the motion controls as well as sing-along stages that use the microphone. Yeah, the microphone that comes with the game, and this is the main reason why the game is expensive. It's harder to find a copy with the microphone, and this is also why this game is an honorable mention, because you don't need the microphone for the entire game, and you can use a different microphone instead of the one that comes with the game. So I was not convinced that this deserved the second place. See, the complete in box price is high at $250, with current offerings going for $500, but copies without the mic cost around $50. So yeah, Atrevete a Soñar. You tell me if this is among the most expensive games or not. And the final game on the Wii is a doozy. I found this so fascinating. Cyberbike Cycling Sports. Okay, this is real out there. It's basically a fitness game on the Wii, so it requires a peripheral as usual, right? Take a wild guess what it is this time. Yep, a stationary bicycle. The biggest, most cumbersome Wii peripheral of all time. And the game requires one of two very specific, very rare to find spin bikes that only came bundled with the game. The original is this white one with nothing too special, and later they released a better version called the Magnetic Edition, where the bike has magnetic resistance and seems to have been improved in many ways. But both of them are extremely rare. I couldn't even find any of the white ones in my research, so you can imagine how expensive this goes for nowadays. The game's concept is actually really interesting. It reminds me of the more recent Ring Fit Adventure on the Switch, because both games actually make you do some real exercise while playing, and Cyberbike got somewhat positive reviews, but only if played with the Magnetic Edition bike that better replicates your pedaling and turning faithfully into the game. The bikes also have all the buttons from the controller for you to use the menus and such, and it attaches to the Wii's GameCube controller port. What's insane about this, and the most interesting part of all, is that the bikes are actually compatible with games that can be played with the GameCube controller, such as Mario Kart Wii, and that means you can play Mario Kart by pedaling a bike on the Wii, and that's freaking awesome. As for prices, the Magnetic Bundle retailed for already expensive $200. It was more expensive than the Wii itself, so predictably it didn't sell too many units, making it a rare as hell item today that increased in price 1,000%. Yep. No exaggeration, 1000%. The bike goes for $2,000. This offering is for the bike alone, no game. And the game alone is also expensive for over 200 bucks. So total price is over 2,200 bucks for a complete copy. Price charting doesn't really understand this because it's not considering that a complete copy would have to come with the bike. So that's why the numbers don't match. So yeah, this is a quite curious entry on the list. It's actually my favorite one on today's video. This is so weird that it's actually kind of cool. Okay, next we move to a very oddball system, the fail portable of the 7th generation, the Gizmondo. Awful name. What is a Gizmondo? I tried, but I couldn't find a way to emulate this one. I also can't afford to buy one, so I can't give you any personal impressions of these games. Sorry about that. Games for this handheld came in a small cartridge, very similar to the PlayStation Vita, and this was made by Tiger Telematics. No, not Tiger Electronics, no relationship there. And it failed miserably. They weren't able to sell even 25,000 units of the system, which makes it nowadays very hard to find and more expensive than any of the games. It goes for over $300 in box. Their games are also very rare, but not a lot of people are looking for them either, so it's a case of low supply and low demand, making sales of Gizmondo games very scarce. So much so that for the first time we have a tie on the second place, because the prices of these games were calculated by price charting by looking at sales of both games in one package. So they simply divided the total by the number of games, and that's all we've got to go by. So take all these prices with a huge grain of salt. First we have Classic Compendium 2. This is a collection of board games, but Chinese board games, which makes it more interesting in my opinion, because it's not your regular checkers, it's Chinese checkers and Chinese chess, and a few others. Pretty cool. According to price charting, it goes for 154 bucks complete in box, and I couldn't find any other sales online to corroborate that, so that's all I've got for you. Tied in second place is Richard Burns Rally. Sorry about the blurry image, this is of the trailer of the game from 2005, early YouTube era, very choppy, but the game actually has very impressive graphics for the time. It's a regular arcadey racer, nothing surprising. I believe it's a decent game for the time, but little reason to go out of your way and pay $145 for it now. Once again, I have nothing else to go with except the numbers from price charting, and this one sale on Heritage Auctions for a whole lot of games plus 2 Gizmondo consoles for almost 700 bucks, which really doesn't tell me much, so let's move on to the next Gizmondo game. And that would be POD, Point of Destruction. This one is among the more interesting Gizmondo games. It's an old school style shoot 'em up in a static screen like Space Invaders, but it counts with a more interesting idea. You can only move on the lines on the checkered grid, but by defeating enemies, the explosion that it causes destroys the grid for a moment, giving this game a nice dynamic. But from what I gather online, the controls are too sensitive. It is hard to move exactly where you want, which diminishes this game's enjoyability. As for prices, this is the most expensive Gizmondo game as for price charting, going for almost 200 bucks complete in box. Once more, I don't have any more data to back this up, so do take it with a big grain of salt. Next we move to the Xbox 360. This was my main system for this generation. Only later I got myself a PlayStation 3, and to this day I never had a Wii. I went straight for the Wii U. That's all to say that I played the 360 a lot. This was an impressive system from the beginning, with pretty great online connectivity features, including the user interface with the blades. Remember that? In my opinion, that was the best game hub ever. It only got worse with every iteration, and no other system did it better in my opinion. And the catalog of the 360 was also impressive, including the downloadable titles, many of which were exclusive at least for a while or for that whole generation. However, there's not a lot going on with this system in terms of rare and expensive games. The ones that do make the list are curiously all sports games, all three of them. First we have NCAA Basketball 10. believe was the last ever college basketball game ever released, and it apparently didn't receive a wide print run, so it's now overpriced at over $100 complete or lose. A similar case goes to NCAA Football 14. Also receiving low print runs and going now for around 100 bucks. Not too much I can say about these because I'm not big on sports games, which also doesn't help me discuss the most expensive game on the Xbox 360, NBA Elite 11. NBA Elite 11 was cancelled after development because EA, of all people, deemed it to be too low quality. Yeah, that statement means a lot, but some copies still got into circulation somehow. But there are so few of them that they go for any kind of price really. Price charting doesn't even have a track record of this version. On eBay there are currently no offers. Just to give you a taste of the prices, someone is selling a official loose printed cover art that wasn't even folded to fit a case, and it is going for 425 bucks for a one-side printed piece of paper. Good grief. The only sale of a copy of the game itself that I could find online took place in August of 2022 on Heritage Auctions and went for crazy almost $7,000, and for a loose copy of the game no less. Holy hell, this is so insane considering that this game is still available for iOS devices for the steep price of $0. Yeah, it's free, but it plays different there because the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions were completely overhauled in the control scheme, and it seems to have made it much worse. So yeah, this is all madness. Next, we move on to the crappiest system on the 7th generation, that I'm only including here because I'm covering every system and for curiosity's sake. We're talking about the Hyperscan. This was made by Famous Toys and television company Mattel back in 2007, and it was a somewhat cheap console aimed at preteens, sold for $70. It is infamous for requiring cards to scan that were sold separately, and those were expensive. The games were affordable for 20 bucks, but they required the cards, and a complete set would cost you between 70 to 130 bucks per game. It was a total scam. It was like microtransactions before microtransactions. It's also famous for the terrible load times and even worse hit detection in every one of the 5 games it has. Yeah, just 5 games, nothing else. I think this is the smallest catalog of games of any console ever, so we don't have a lot to work with here. Every console came with the game X-Men, and by the way, in this case we can't trust price charting because it tracks the Hyperscan very poorly. For instance, it says that X-Men goes for 73 bucks complete, but that's based on one sold copy of the game with the system, so it's all wrong. I cross-checked the whole thing with eBay and other sites to refine this better. The third place goes to Interstellar Wrestling League. This is even worse than the X-Men fighting game, with more unappealing graphics and art design, less interesting characters and progression, just a very poor fighting game all around. It goes for 60 bucks as for price charting, but on eBay I could find the game pack, which contains the disc and the cards that are required to play the game, for 40 or 45 bucks. Next is Marvel Heroes. This is a side-scroller action game with the worst hit detection of all games on the system. It is truly atrocious. Price charting has no record of this one. It seems to be the rarest game. Even on eBay there's not a lot to go with. The only one I found there came also with another game and went for 90 bucks, but had none of the cards you would need. So let's say the disc alone was 40 bucks or so, then the booster packs with most of the cards you would need are going for 12 bucks. So that puts it a bit over 50 bucks for this one, give or take. And finally, Spider-Man is both one of the least awful games on the Hyperscan as well as the more expensive one. It's a side-scroller action platformer with all the moves you would expect from Spider-Man, but nothing to write home about. It's a simple game lacking in any kind of creativity. Price charting once again gets it all wrong. They have no records on the completing box part. The one sale on the loose category doesn't even have the disc. It's just an empty box. So only the new category is correct at 70 bucks, but a recent sold completing box copy with the cards on eBay went for 85 bucks. So that's the one I'm going with. And there we have it, folks. The Hyperscan. It sucked. Next up, we move to the PlayStation 3. This system had a roller coaster ride. Sony was on the top of the world coming out of the PlayStation 2 era, and they were on a high horse for the release of the system. We had the disastrous announcement of the $599 price tag and a lackluster presentation of upcoming games, so they fell hard from their high horse and had to struggle a lot to find their footing afterwards, but eventually recovered and managed to avoid ending in the last place between the big three. Barely, but still. This system has a very obtuse architecture, which made developing games for it extra challenging for a while, which is also why the PlayStation 3 is still problematic to emulate. So yeah, this is a weird system, but many wonderful games can only be found here, which is definitely true for this first entry, which is actually an extra honorable mention because the first place is a duplicate, and that's kinda lame, so I'm making up for that. So beginning with number 4, we have a true PlayStation 3 hidden gem from Sony Japan Studio, The Last Guy. I talked about this one along with many other fantastic hidden gems on the PlayStation 3. On this video you're seeing the corner of the screen now, so do check that out if you're into the PlayStation 3. The Last Guy is a very unique game. You control the guy tasked with taking the remaining survivors of the zombie apocalypse to the rescue zones. To do so you have to approach the buildings, which will cause the citizens to go outside, then you gather up as many of them as you can as a shepherd and guide them to safety. This is a very fun game actually, the hard to stop playing kind, and there are a few reasons why this is so expensive. First, this is a PlayStation 3 exclusive game, and second, and more importantly, is that other than the Japanese copies, where the game of course is all in Japanese, they only ever released one more version. Not a US, not a European, but a Chinese English version. It had to be imported, and this was never and still isn't a very well-known game, so not a lot of copies of The Last Guy were ever even bought, at least not by Western country citizens. So this game is now expensive. It now goes for about $300 complete as per price charting, and eBay puts it at even more expensive prices, with recent sales going for at least $333 and current offerings for no less than $400. Quick reminder that this game is available on PSN for $9.99, so I would advise grabbing it there before they close the thing down for good, because this game is worth it. The next expensive title is the Siberia Complete Collection. This one comes with Siberia 1 and 2 in one disc. These two games are solid, classic style point-and-click adventure games with interesting stories and a wonderfully mysterious setting. They are directly connected, and while the first one has a lackluster ending, that's just because it continues in the second game, which closes the story nicely. The Siberia series has a cult following, indicating its quality. These are great games for fans of this genre. The reason why this is expensive is that the US version wasn't released on retail. You had to order it directly with the company at a time when this sort of thing was less popular. So few copies were sold, and this is now a rare game. I have a Brazilian version of this collection, which despite having the cover and manual written in Portuguese, has the disc in the same region as the US version, which doesn't make much of a difference anyway, since the PlayStation 3 is region free. In any case, all versions are now expensive, with the US ones going for over $400 complete in box as per price charting. Recent sold copies on eBay went for closer to $300 though. However, this same collection is also available on the Switch, and we now have Siberia 3 already out, and after that they also made a physical version of the trilogy, so that's the most complete compilation to date. Then the second most expensive PlayStation 3 game right now is Aquanauts Holiday Hidden Memories. This is a beautiful game. It is similar to Africa in gameplay concept. You have to find and document all of the creatures, but deep inside the water, the act of doing so feels much more interesting and engaging, and it helps a lot that Aquanauts Holiday is much better polished than Africa in the animations, graphical detail, and overall atmosphere. This game is really interesting, albeit only for a niche audience. Just like The Last Guy, this is also a Sony Japan studio game that received only a Japanese physical release, other than the elusive and much more coveted Chinese English version. It also doesn't help that this game is not available on PSN for Western accounts, so most people's only option is the Chinese English physical, which goes for prohibitive $500 complete in box according to price charting. Sold copies on eBay are exactly on that amount, and current offerings are approaching $700. And as I said, the most expensive game on the PlayStation 3 is a duplicate, the same as on the Xbox 360, which is why I included an extra game for the PlayStation 3. We are of course talking about NBA Elite 11 once again. I'm not gonna explain it all over, but the prices are rather different. Take a look. While price charting averages the price of complete copies at $3,700 and some change, recent sold copies on eBay went for over $10,000, and one of them reached $17,500. Holy hell. And to close things off, we have the PSP. This thing is impressive. It was seriously ahead of its time in many ways. The simple fact that you can plug it in your TV, which I feel like is a feature they never advertised properly, that allows you to play using the PSP as a controller, is pretty freaking fantastic. We only saw something similar many years later with the Wii U kinda, and now with the Switch, and even the Vita had to have a whole other system, the PSTV, to do it half as well as the PSP, because many Vita games don't work on the PSTV. The graphical quality on the PSP is also staggering for its time, but the most amazing feature of the PSP is certainly its catalog of games, especially on the RPG category. What a phenomenal system for RPGs in both quantity and quality. And the first game here is a great example, Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Here it is. This is a special edition with a soundtrack CD. This game is pretty cool. The reason why this game is called Innocent Sin is very interesting. That part of the story is enough to justify playing this game. The rest of the story though is so bonkers that it flew right above my head. The combat is great, but I prefer the one in the original Persona, but still good enough. Meanwhile, I love the characters and the character development in this game. The game was kind of a mixed bag for me, but much more on the positive side than on the negative. It's not a masterpiece, but a fine game for sure. Enough people surely agree to the point where this game is going for no less than $150 for a complete in-box standard copy, both as per price charting and eBay. Limited editions go for almost $200, and PAL versions of the collector's edition go for over $260. Any way you cut it, Persona 2 Innocent Sin is expensive. It only loses to another RPG, a hidden gem for sure, called Hexis Force. Here it is. I'm lucky to have started collecting PSP games for over a decade now, cause this was cheap back then, and it was one of my favorite games on the PSP. Hexis Force is a traditional RPG with a battle mechanic that invites a welcome amount of strategy. The characters equip special weapons called Ragnafacts that can unleash attacks against single or multiple foes. The catch is that these attacks will cost Ragna points that can only be replenished in special places or by leveling up, so deciding when and how to use them introduces a nice layer of strategy. This game has a lot to offer, including a nice cast of characters, interesting story, and a strong replayability aspect. Prices for a complete in-box copy go for $167 on average, even though this game can be purchased on PSN for the PS Vita for $15. And now for the most expensive game on the PSP, this one is something else. This is Hilton Garden Inn Ultimate Team Play. Yeah, you heard it right. Hilton, as in the famous multinational hotel and resorts company Hilton. Yeah. This is very similar to the McDonald's DS game actually. It's a training application of sorts for the employees to learn a number of hospitality related tasks. The game has 3D graphics, some real effort went into this, and the tasks are surprisingly involved with a lot of details in the task of engineering, guest service, serving food and beverage, and housekeeping. It's insane that this exists and was only ever made for employees of Hilton hotels to play, never released to the public, so that's why it's the rarest and most expensive PSP title, going for over $2,000 complete in box or $1,600 for a loose copy. There currently is one copy on sale on eBay for at least $2,000, so if you want to be the best Hilton employee to ever exist, you'll need some hefty investment, I'll tell you. And that's it for today, but stay tuned for the next episodes. I'll keep going backwards in time, and with each generation there are more and more crazy rare, expensive, obscure, and insanely interesting games to discuss. Once again, do join the Discord channel to hang out and participate in the discussions and in the giveaways. And if you enjoyed the channel, please consider joining the Patreon to keep the lights on here, so I can keep bringing interesting obscure games to you. Thank you so much to all of you who already do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.